I will.
See, Chief, we set it up like a nice family dinner.
Stop the meatballs.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for coming. Appreciate the opportunity to talk about an important issue, I think, that goes directly to the public's confidence in an important civic institution. And I think it's a matter that deserves thoughtful attention, and I don't believe it has received that, so this is an opportunity to talk about it. Journal Sentinel recently did some articles and is continuing to do them, looking into the validity of some of our crime reporting. And in the context of that reporting has identified some coding errors that in fact have occurred. We're not engaged in a campaign of denial here. We admit that we are a complicated bureaucratic institution, and we admit that mistakes get made by human beings from time to time. But the implication in the coverage appears to be that there's some sort of nefarious plot going on to intentionally mislead the public. And I reject those findings, and I quite sincerely believe that this newspaper is being intellectually dishonest and is engaged in a calculated campaign to discredit this institution, as well as the efforts of the city of Milwaukee to deal with the important issue of crime. Now, as we engage with this issue, I want to be able to disaggregate the responsibility of my office, to take responsibility for the work of the members of this organization, and to take steps to improve our ability to accurately produce crime data for uniform crime reporting purposes. It's important to draw a distinction between uniform crime reporting purposes and how we investigate crimes. It's also important for me to make a very important point. Data matters for two reasons. Number one, it guides our deployments. It is how we decide to put officers in what we call hotspot locations to engage in proactive police activity to affect the behavior that we're attempting to interdict. The other reason data matters is this is an opportunity for us to measure progress. It is for that reason the Uniform Crime Reporting System was developed 70 years ago. Having said that, I want the community to know that our first priority remains creating neighborhoods that's capable of sustaining civic life. Our first priority isn't numbers, our first priority is people. And as I said moments ago, the numbers matter for us to measure progress to guide deployments. Having said all of these things, when the paper first started doing these reports, we pretty much, have cooperated with them. I mean, obviously, massive open records requests entail an actual cost to this city that is not insignificant. And this has been the course of more than a little bit of litigation as time has gone by. But the fact of the matter remains that in terms of explaining what we do and why we do it, we've been forthcoming and have engaged in extensive meetings with people writing this article, explaining how the reporting processes work. The reason I find the reporting intellectually dishonest starts with the first major alleged finding, which was the banner headlines implying that if one factored in the coding errors of 2011's aggravated assault reports, crime actually went up in Milwaukee in 2011, not down. Why is that intellectually dishonest? Well, it assumes the same bad people that miscoded reports in 2011 produced perfect reports in 2010. All right, because the only way to get a crime trend against the city of Milwaukee's interests is to assume that 2010's error rate was 0. The author of that article knows the error rate was not 0 in 2010, and so do we. In fact, what we know is the error rate has been fairly consistent since 2006. Now, as a practical matter, intellectually honest researchers will say, if you factor in a consistent error rate over time, progress is still progress. But that didn't fit in with the editorial agenda of this coverage, and so we therefore ended up with a series of stories that would lead people to think that there was some sort of calculated effort to mislead them. That's false. The next point I want to make is the following. I believe that when you focus the efforts of 2,000 people on crime control, give them daily updates of crime patterns and trends, deploy them in response to those trends, increase car stops from 60,000 a year to 190,000 a year, increase pedestrian stops from 14,000 a year to 60,000 a year, I foolishly believe that those efforts will have a measurable impact on the conduct we're trying to deter. And I still believe that if we factor in a constant error rate, that case can be made. Now, I sat down at this table with that reporter and his editor, and I asked them 3 very simple questions. Number 1, when you're trying to compare the error rate of 2011, how does it compare to years before I got here, as well as other years since I've been here? We don't know. Okay? How does our crime reporting error rate compare to other cities of 500,000 with similar crime and poverty rates? We don't know. How does our error rate compare to other Tiburon users of our size? We don't know. So apparently the universe is one and the standard is perfection. Chuckle, chuckle. Now, in that same conversation, members of my staff after I left spoke with the reporter and say, well, while you are identifying problems with coding crimes downward, in the 17,000 assault reports that were made over those 2 years, were there any coding errors upward? Yeah. Well, that's not the focus of the story. Now the buck stops here. I'm responsible for the behavior of this organization, whether it's got to do with how we conduct our patrol activities, how we stop people, how we chase people, how we use force, how we investigate ourselves, and how we report crimes. And as we take responsibility for our actions, it's also our responsibility to identify some solutions to improve identified problems, which is what we're going to do here. But it's an extraordinary stretch to identify a finite number of errors in a specific time period, compare them to nothing, and then imply in article after article that something nefarious is afoot. And I don't think there's any better indication of their editorial bias than their coverage of yesterday's city council meeting. If you were to read the newspaper article today, you would think everybody that spoke said something that supported the editorial position of the Journal Sentinel. Well, we took the time and trouble today to post the city council meeting on our website. Alderman Murphy, Alderman Kovac, several other aldermen got up and at length took them to task for what they perceived to be shallow and incomplete analysis of this important issue. Amazingly, none of those quotes made it into the newspaper. Now, I believe that they've got a responsibility. They are an important civic institution. The media is the only people in town to hold government accountable. Fine, all right? We've all taken our shots at the appropriate times and places. But what I need to know is who holds accountable somebody who's got an agenda that's pursued relentlessly and without regard for context or countervailing facts. That's a source of, well, frustration, perhaps too strong a word, but a certain amount of indignation. I believe that our work matters. I believe our officers are having an impact on crime and fear. I believe people make mistakes. I believe mistakes can be held constant over time, and I believe that we can put ourselves in a position of correcting the pattern of errors that have been identified and can move forward and probably end up with more accurate data than anybody else has got. But I'm disturbed at the manner and method of how this important issue is being covered. Hence, I am responding to the assertions. I mean, today's article, for example, you identify 500 coding errors. We go back and we run down where the coding errors emanate from. We report back in a conversational environment. This is what we have found out. Oh my God, new headline. Okay, fine. I guess we weren't supposed to find out where the coding errors were. So we're going to continue to work on the issue. None of this stuff is dire. Certainly none of it is any kind of orchestrated attempt. I don't need to make up numbers to prove my cops are having an impact on the quality of life and the level of violence in our neighborhoods. And we're going to continue to move forward to refine both our crime-fighting tactics as well as our reporting systems so that we can do the best we can to both deploy our resources accurately and report as accurately as we can to the general public what progress we're being made. So, there. Finished venting. Please, ask away.
I guess bottom line, can you definitively assure the resident by the administration of the Milwaukee Police Department to intentionally skew the numbers that all of these errors are indeed, in fact, human errors?
Yes.
If they're human errors, Chief, who's responsible? What is it? Lack of supervision? I mean, does it all go back to a lousy computer system? I mean, even if they're human errors, presumably there should be supervision there and training. What needs to change so that that doesn't happen?
Well, one of the things we're going to offer you when this part is over is an opportunity to look at the drop-down menus of the typical police report. Because I think in people's heads, they think the computer shows them the kind of report you would fill in by hand, and all they've got to do is fill in the blanks. It is a series of drop-down menus. And, for example, the drop-down menu on assault offers an officer 13 different choices to make as to how to fill in that blank. In today's ComStat meeting, for example, one of our district commanders is reporting a significant increase in aggravated assaults because he said, we're not taking any chances. If there's a weapon, we're reporting as an aggravated assault. Here's an example. Somebody threw a shoe at somebody. We categorize as an aggravated assault because that's a weapon. Well, my Central Records people, who we just put through a new training so that every Central Records person will be a subject matter expert in a single crime, said, don't do that. That's wrong. What do you mean? Shoe's not a dangerous weapon unless it's used and actually causes physical damage to somebody. Throwing it at somebody doesn't make it a dangerous weapon. Okay, well, wait a minute. We had a situation where somebody waved a knife at somebody and ran away. Is that an aggravated assault or no assault at all? Oh, that's an aggravated assault. Oh, we categorize that as... Obviously, part of it's a training issue, all right? I'm casting no aspersions. Ultimately, I should have walked in here and while we were trying to get the computer system to work, which didn't. We needed the private sector, you may recall a few years ago, to step in and get the contractor to do their job because there weren't daily crime stats when I got here. When we took that issue on, should have taken a look at how we were auditing our reports. I didn't. My bad. So it's on me. We've got to do a better job, clearly, of training. A lot of the reports are auto-populated by the RMS system. If our officer types in a certain statute, the UCR code is supposed to get figured in automatically. The issue we identified at Central Records was a human error, which is when there was a gap between what the officer entered in as the heading and the computer not accepting it because somewhere in the body of the report a weapon was referenced. Central Records people were saying, okay, other for weapon, because the system would accept UCR. They weren't being malicious, they weren't covering anything up. Cop had coded simple assault, we got to get the simple assault in. Well, if I do a simple assault against you, if I punch you in the nose and give you a bloody nose, it's a ticket, it's not an aggravated assault. If I throw a punch at you and have a gun in my waistband, that's an aggravated assault. And what we had was people clearly needing more training, applying common sense approaches to figuring out what the code was at the data entry level, at the supervisory level, and at the Central Records level. Those are training issues that can be fixed. The reason the RMS is problematic is that it's a very cumbersome system. As even the newspaper referenced, it happened in Kansas City a few years ago with the same darn system. I'm not pointing fingers at systems, and I'm sure as heck not pointing fingers at my own people. Ultimately, my bad. I should have had an auditing system. Came in here, and my assumption was, that part we're doing. We've got to get the daily crime out rapidly because we don't have any daily crime numbers now. All right, we're going to double back and fix that. But that is way different than me feeling any pressure to mislead the public about the direction of crime in this city. And yeah, okay, I hang my hat on homicides. Not because that's the perfect predictor, but doggone it. If I'm mixing it up with the gangs out there trying to disrupt the cycle of violence between gangs and disrupt drug-related violence, we go from a 20-year average of 127 to a 4-year average of 85, I'm thinking some good policing's going on. And I'm thinking that is logically reflected in my ag assault reports ultimately once we figure out what the coding error rate is over time. Again, I don't need to make stuff up to show the efforts of 2,000 people focused on hotspots is having an impact on measurable crime in this city.
So bottom line.
Are you saying that there are issues across the board, not just aggravated assaults?
Well, I mean, in any report category, you are ultimately, if you're going to hire a full-time proofreader for the police reports, you're going to find an error rate. Challenge is this. The FBI has a quality assurance unit that we asked to come here. Why? Because I found out this year, or late last year actually, our data had never been audited by the FBI. Never. Not just in my 4 years, ever. So I asked them to come in here and do an audit, a random audit of our data, because I want to know if we got consistent coding errors. For crying out loud, I was pretty arrogant when this business started. I thought, hey, come on in, guys. You're going to find something wrong with my data? Good luck to you. You know, we've been over this with a fine-tooth comb. Okay, my face is red. Turns out we did have some coding error issues. But the point is, you know, we're identifying where the problems arose from. And human errors in a complex organization that are stable over time are not a plot or a scheme to do something wrong.
So with all this said, do you still believe that violent crime is in fact down in the city of Milwaukee?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, just stop and think for a minute. Follow, please, the logic. I'm not even going to get into my, you know, I'm mad at the Journal Sentinel mode right now, all right? If you're going to take 2011 and factor in the error rate you found, and assume that the exact year before with all of the same people in the same positions is perfect data, it's intellectually dishonest to say, well, I've really uncovered an increase because we've identified this error rate in 2011. Are we to assume there was a zero error rate in 2010? Of course not. The same bloody damn error rate's going to pop up the year before. What I'm saying is that if you hold the error rate constant over several years, you're still going to have a measurable decline in that level of activity.
And do you group WTMJ television and WTMJ radio news in with the Journal Sentinel?
TMJ television? No, I think they're an absolute pinnacle, except for WISN and Fox. Listen, you're not going to win a battle, you know, taking on an institution that has a newspaper, a radio station, and a TV station. All right? I will note that it's unusual for corporate entities to break ranks on any particular issue. That doesn't mean they're all engaged in a cabal against the police department, but everybody makes a paycheck and has a boss. And I'm not going to pretend that that doesn't influence the fact that very rarely will you find in TMJ enterprises somebody breaking ranks. They got to have pretty heavy-duty, you know, ratings to be able to do that.
So as far as there was something saying that a clerk was going in, the system was raising red flags, and that these
Well,
clerks.
the system is programmed to say, oops, error, you can't have both. Okay?
So then why would it be changed by hand?
Well, I mean, it's keystrokes. I mean, nobody pulls out a report and, you know, erases it. I mean, it's a keystroke change. Does anybody can do a better job than me in explaining that? Anybody?
Yeah,
Right.
it's a perfect explanation. They change it in the computer.
You know, that's all. I mean, the computer will say the UCR data dump won't accept it with a gun in the narrative and a heading of simple assault.
Right.
And 9 times out of 10, the gun's in the narrative because it was there, not because it was used. Cops know when somebody uses a gun, it's an ag assault. But if a gun is present, it's an ag assault, even if you're using your hands. And that type of thing caused people to say, well, you know, it was only a simple assault. There was a gun. Okay, fine. Get it into the computer. We'll make this. They weren't changing the facts of the case. I mean, the only reason they could identify an error rate in the newspaper is because all of the facts were in the narrative.
It's a
Nobody's
matter of-
changing the narrative to say, ooh,
Yeah.
this really didn't happen, and now we can justify the heading. No, honest people wrote what actually happened, and that same person that wrote the narrative put in the header. Okay, that's the important thing. So anybody who wanted to pick that report up for coding purposes would say, oh, well, wait a minute. But because, you know, we got 17,000 assaults in 2 years, it gets bureaucratic. People are like pumping it in. What's the problem? Oh, the damn thing kicked it out again. Okay.
I guess then some might say, why wouldn't that person know how to code just because a weapon's there?
Well, I'll tell you right now, they goddamn well know how to code. I mean, excuse me. I mean, I can tell you right now, Central Records knows what to look for, okay? You know, we've got a list of things we've done. You know, we've enhanced the training there. We've made subject matter experts in the Central Records division. They're much more on their game now, and it's, I mean, to their credit, right? They took the training. They're good at it. They're smart. Okay, we had to clarify some stuff. We had to pay attention to that piece, and we hadn't been. Now, when Kansas City had this identical problem, it took them a year to train the coppers. And that's something we haven't undertaken yet. But we recognize that that's a component as well. But right now, the first place to go is Central Records, because that's the last stop before it goes into the uniform crime reports. And so those folks got some super duper enhanced training so that we can now start making sure that the errors that were uncovered in 2011 aren't repeated in 2012.
And
Chief,
so officially
Chief,
placed
Chief,
as-
one more
I'm
question.
Bill- Chief,
Chief?
I'm Bill Glauber with the Journal Sentinel.
Hi, Bill.
Hi, how you doing?
Say hello to my friends there.
When are you gonna make the reports available and stop hiding behind $10,000 charges?
Oh, gosh, well, when are you going to
stop
give us your notes? When's Ben going to give us the notes about the overcoding errors? Oh, you don't have Freedom of Information request. Your job is to get the taxpayer to fund your attempt to make stories. Well, guess what? When it costs us thousands of dollars to feed you, we don't think your allegedly for-profit enterprise should get that stuff for free. And I don't think that's a bad thing to do. I don't think the taxpayers need to underwrite you.
Thanks,
So you don't want to answer questions? to the
No, I
public?
answered it. I answered it.
No,
you heard it.
no,
Sorry you
sir,
don't like
no,
it.
no.
Listen,
You gave a
go
lecture,
find out.
you
What, yeah, you're right.
You gave a lecture, we sat and listened.
Yeah.
You gave a lecture.
And you
When
asked
are
me a
gonna
pointed
release the
question.
records?
You
When
asked me a
will you
pointed.
release the
I
records?
asked you. I gave you a pointed response.
I'm-
This is in
this
court.
your
Is this
press
in court?
conference.
Is this in court?
This is a press
Is
conference.
this in court?
This is a press conference. This is not.
All right, we're getting nowhere, buddy.
I guess I will send you the shooting, and I'll send you